Chapters 21 and 22. Chapter 21. The Carlson Graves. My dad asked around to all of our neighbors about the snake, but no one could say how it got there, despite it happening in the middle of the day and the fact that my mom had been home the whole time. She had been in the kitchen, yet she swears she didn't hear anyone come up the walk, and she certainly didn't hear a nail being driven through our front door. I stood with my dad in our backyard, beside the fence and winter shrubs. He was holding the nail we'd removed from the snake's head. Her body he'd given back to Bert, who would keep her in the freezer until he could bury her in the spring. Someone must have seen something, I said, eyeing in particular Mrs. Schumann's front windows that lined up nearly perfectly with ours right across the street. If they did, no one's talking. He rubbed the nail back and forth between his fingers. All the blood was gone. It looked like a brand new nail. If you hear anyone whispering about it at school, you let me know. We should have dusted the door for prints. But I was just so eager to. It was only a prank, Michael. I wasn't going to pull prints for a prank. How'd they get it out of Bert's house, though? How do they keep it from being seen? My dad looked at me thinking I was getting spooked, and worried I was starting to buy into everything Marie was telling me. He was seen, he said. Whoever saw him is just lying about it, and I don't know why. It must have been from someone from school, I said, or there are plenty of people around town, I guess. I glanced at him. By then, my dad walked around with a slight hunch, like he was ready to fend off something thrown at him. Don, who had always loved school, didn't want to go anymore because of the things the other kids were saying about us, and Steve and his parents were lying cold in boxes under the ground. We'll be all right, my dad said. This will pass, and everything will go back to the way it was. Except that was the problem. The hostility had taken hold of Black Deer Falls so fast and with such ease that it was hard to pretend that it hadn't always been there. On the way to the jail to see Marie, Charlie rolled past me in his patrol car. He nodded from behind the wheel, but he was grim. Because he wasn't just driving by on the way to see my dad. He was on duty and keeping an extra eye on our house. I thought the interviews were my ticket into any journalism program in the country. That ambition had started to feel foolish. I'd been thoroughly humiliated and made to look like an idiot, chasing symbols through the woods, reading about vampires. My family was being harassed. By the time I knocked at the door to the woman's cell, I was angry, and I threw open the door. It's not a game now, I said. What's he playing at? Marie stood, fist clenched. She looked at the door, still banging against the wall. I don't know. I've been stuck in here, if you haven't noticed. You're going to be stuck in here for the rest of your life if you don't start telling the truth. They can't keep me forever, she said. Not when I didn't do anything. Even if you didn't kill them, you were there. Only because he made me. Because he said I needed to if I wanted to. She cut off abruptly. I was mad, but so was she. I could tell by the bright shine in her eyes and the way her chest rose and fell under her sweater. If you wanted to be like him, I said, disgusted. What's gotten into you? She said. I mean, I heard about what happened to Bert Snake. That could have been anybody who did that. But it wasn't just anybody, was it? I told you, I don't know. Sometimes I wish you'd never come here, I said. Only sometimes? They hate you, you know, everyone, and they hate us too. Me, my dad, my little sister, because they think they're going to think what they want to think. They don't know. They know what you brought with you, I said. All this mess. Marie relaxed. She slipped another cigarette out of her sleeve and lit it, even though she'd been smoking one just before I came in. I could still smell it hanging in the closed air. Not everyone hates me, she said and puffed. Nancy doesn't. You don't. What would you do? She asked. If someone told you you could live forever. That's not possible. What if it was? What would you do for it? What would you give? Nothing, I said. I only want the life God gave me. That's only because he gave you a good one, Marie whispered. Marie, I just want you to... I stopped. Standing there watching her smoke, the anger just dropped through my feet. I couldn't say all the things I wanted. I wanted things I couldn't even admit to myself, and I wanted for her to be innocent. I just want you to tell me the truth. I just want him in the chair where he belongs. If he comes near my family, I'll take him in myself. Don't do that, Marie said. Why not? I'm not afraid of a knife, Marie. I'm not afraid of a straight razor. Don't be stupid, Michael. Maria was tough, tougher than most, boys or girls, but she was so frustrated with me she could hardly speak. Look, I don't want anything to happen to you, okay? Nothing's going to happen to me, I said, and left. That night, Percy dragged me out, away from my notes, away from Marie. Just come and have a few, he said. A bunch of us are going to the lake. It'll be fun. We drove down the dirt roads that edged Eyeglass Lake and stopped when we got to the row of cars parked along the shoulder. Then we got out and made our way down to the boat landing. This doesn't sound like a small party, I said. I never said it was, said Percy. The road was hard-packed with snow, and the air was crisp and clean. Orange light flickered in the trees from the fire someone had started by the shore, but we'd been able to see without it. Out there, the moon reflected off the snow and made it bright enough to see the happy grin on Percy's face. The night was warm, all the way up to the low 30s, which may not sound like much, but when temps drop regularly into the single digits, 25 starts to feel downright balmy. We were late, or so it seemed, though it couldn't have been past 10 o'clock. When we reached the party, Percy asked for a few dollars and headed off. When he came back, he had 2 six-packs tucked under his arm. He popped off 2 cans and put one in each of my hands, to catch up. I don't know who put the party together. I never asked. Percy always seemed to know about those kind of things, what was happening, where, and who was going. I saw a few guys from our baseball team, mostly the ones who played football too. And a few of the girls were there. Sandy Millpoint and Jackie and Violet Stewart, Rebecca Knox, and a few of her friends, standing by the fire, looking nice with scarves wrapped over their ears. I did as Percy asked and drank a few, and then I drank a few more. I helped the guys unload more firewood. Nobody seemed to mind that I was there, and if they looked at me funny after the first 4 beers, I didn't notice. I sang the school fight song with everybody, but mostly I kept to myself and let Percy do the entertaining. He'd had quite a bit to drink, but he kept on looping back to me. You feeling okay? You out of beer? Nope, I'm fine. Jackie Stewart looks cold. Maybe you should go see about warming her up. I think Morgan's doing a good job of that already. I gestured to a parked car near the road with the taillights on and the rear window all fogged up, and Percy made this disappointed face like he hadn't known she'd gone in there. After a while, it got pretty late, and the girls went home, and the guys started horsing around on the ice, sliding around in snowball bowling, but everybody was too drunk to be any good. I was pretty drunk, too, so when the fire died down and someone said they had an idea, Percy and I didn't ask questions. We got into our cars and drove along the snow-packed dirt roads too fast and too loud. There was a bunch of us, but I can't say with certainty who was there. Morgan for sure. He and Paul Buell rode in Percy's car. I thought I'd seen Joe Conley earlier, but I think he'd gone home by then. There weren't any houses out that way, so we turned our radios up and rolled down the windows. One of the guys in the car in front of us pulled down his pants and flashed a full moon through the back. Percy hung his head at the driver's side and howled at it. By the time we stopped, we were out of breath from laughing. I don't think Percy even knew where he'd driven us, but we'd wound up at the Methodist cemetery. The Methodist cemetery isn't very big, and it's pretty far out. The parking lot only had enough space for 4 cars. Funeral parties had to pull off and park along the ditch down the road. What are we doing here? Percy asked, but I think he knew. The Methodist cemetery was where the Carlsons were buried. A few of the guys tugged to open the short iron gate. It had been half ajar already, and even if it had been locked, we could have jumped it. I hadn't noticed when we left the lake, but the only boys who'd come with us were Steve's friends. His best friend, Rudy Bartholomew, who everyone called Rudy Bart when he came onto the football field, tossed me a fresh beer and said to come on. You want to go home? Percy asked. I looked at the guys. They were still laughing, maybe swaying a little on their feet. I didn't feel like going home. It felt like I should go in, like I should have gone already. They led us through the cemetery, up the hills, past the grave markers, most of them small, some of them old and leaning crookedly, partially sunk into the dirt. Some clouds had rolled in, and it was darker there than by the lake. I tucked the beer into my coat pocket and pulled my collar up. Ahead, the guys were shouting. They shouted, Ruby Bart, all at once, like they had when he took the field during home games. Rudy Bart, like 10 Hut in the army. Percy tripped over something and swore. Someone got a light, he called, and ahead one of them switched on a flashlight. "Don't yell in the cemetery," someone hollered, and we heard them laughing. "This doesn't feel right," Percy said. "Let's go back." "What about Morgan and Paul?" "They can pile into one of the other cars. They'll be all right." But it was too late. They'd stopped at a flat patch of ground under a copse of bare winter trees, the Carlson's graves. Their headstones weren't like the others in the cemetery. The town had taken up a collection and purchased all three, large rectangular monuments in white granite. They sat in a row, Bob and Sarah and Steve in between them, and against the snow, the white of the granite looked dirty and gray. I crept closer, shoes sinking into the snow. It was different seeing them there than seeing their caskets, buried under all the dirt and all that snow resting beneath the heavy headstones. The Carlsons felt like a memory. The first full can of beer hit me in the back between the shoulder blades. The next one caught me in the side of the head by my ear. I barely felt the cold of the snow on my hands when I fell. "Hey!" Percy shouted. The hit near my ear made my head ring, but I could still see two guys grab Percy from behind. They yanked his arms back hard enough to pull him up on his toes. "Knock it off, guys. That's not funny." "It's not supposed to be funny," said Paul, and threw another can. It was open already and half gone. It hit me in the chest and splashed beer up onto my chin. "Hey, let go of him," I said, and got up onto my knees. In the fog of the beer, I thought they were going after Percy, but they were just holding him back. A few more cans hit, catching me in the face. Or maybe someone hit me. I'd never been in a real fight before, and I suppose that wasn't much of one either. I just knew that the blood was warm coming out of my nose and tasted bad, and my split lip was stinging already. I knew I'd had too much to drink, and I thought if I lay down a while, whatever was happening would stop. "Cut it out," Rudy said. "It's a waste of beer." The cans and hits stopped. It was just Rudy standing there with his dad's pistol. "You better leave off," Percy shouted. "He's a Jensen and you'll catch hell." But they knew that already. They'd known that before they started. "You planned this," I said, and Rudy pointed the gun at my face. "Shut up," he said. "You've got this coming." I was on my knees in the snow beside the Carlson's headstones. Percy was screaming, asking them what they were doing, warning them off. I was going to let her get away with it, they said. I was a traitor. "Don't," I said. "Rudy, don't." "You think you're so smart," he said. Then he screamed in my face, and I shut my eyes. I knew that they meant to do it, that they would lose the last of their tempers and pull the trigger. I knew they'd kill Percy, too. "Keep the light on him," Rudy shouted. Then he pointed the gun at Percy, who had started to call for help. "Leave him alone," I screamed and straightened up, still on my knees in the snow. The gun swung back, and Rudy rushed forward and pressed the barrel against my forehead. I closed my eyes again. "Keep it on him," I heard him saying. "Keep it." He stopped. "What is that?" I heard him ask. "I don't know," said Morgan. "Give me the light." I opened my eyes and looked at Percy as the beam of the flashlight moved behind me. The guys holding me had let their arms go slack, and Percy had nearly sunk down to the ground. They looked less certain. "What is it?" Paul asked. He went around with Morgan to Rudy. They were behind the graves, the flashlight trained on the back of Steve's headstone. "What is that?" Morgan asked. "Jesus Christ, what is that?" The guys holding Percy let go as the flashlight beam swung wildly into the trees like Mose had the night of the search party, and Percy scrambled over me. "Let's get out of here," he whispered. "Let's go." He started to help me up, but Paul and Morgan started screeching the same thing. "Let's get out of here, Rudy, come on." Then they ran off and took the flashlight with them, leaving Percy and me in the dark. After a few minutes, we heard their cars start up and their tires spin as they drove out of the parking lot. "You okay?" Percy asked. "Christ, you're bleeding." "I'm okay." "Christ, let's get out of here." But I was looking at Steve's headstone in the scant moonlight. They'd seen something there. Something had stopped them. "Hang on," I said. "Hang on for what?" "Percy, give me your lighter." He grumbled and handed it over, and we moved around the graves. I flipped the lighter open and flicked it on. "What in the jumping hells?" Percy whispered. The same symbol that had been carved into the trees in the woods had been cut into the back of Steve's headstone. I held the flame closer. It wasn't just one symbol this time. It was dozens, etched into the granite, so tightly packed that one bled into the next. Large and small, some so shallow it could have been done with a penknife, others so deep it was a wonder that the whole headstone hadn't cracked into pieces. I cast the light out into the trees, just like Rudy had with the flashlight, and Percy jumped. Whoever had done it wasn't there anymore. The marks had taken time and could have been done any night after the headstones had been installed. Just the same, I was waiting to see that pale face. "Hey," Percy said, "can we just go now? Can we just go?" Yeah, let's go." We walked back away from the graves and walked out of the cemetery, and I didn't flip the lighters shut until we were inside his car. We spent the night at Percy's place, in his room with the lights on and pretending to read comics after I'd washed all the blood from my face. "What are we going to tell your dad?" Percy asked. "The truth, I guess. Just not all of it." We were fooling around at the lake and decided to visit the cemetery. We saw the marks on the headstone and got into a fight. "With who?" he asked. "With everyone. We were all upset. It all happened fast." "You're just going to let them get away with it? Morgan and Ruby, Bart, and those guys? They didn't mean anything by it," I said. "They had a gun. They weren't going to use it." But they were, and he knew they were too. I could see it on his face. "I guess it was lucky for us the killer decided to mark up Steve's headstone," he said. "That's a strange thing to have to say." "Yeah," I said, but I knew what he meant. The blood drinker, whoever had carved up Steve's headstone before we got there, had saved us by accident. Over the next few months, I thought about that a lot. I wondered if there were other symbols just waiting to be found. "Well," Percy said inside, "you want to punch me in the eye? Mo's going to do it anyway when he hears you got beat up, and I came out with not even a scratch." Mo would never do that, of course, but I told Percy I would hit him with a board before we went to school if that would make him feel better. Chapter 22. Lasting Cuts. Percy and I reported the defacing of Steve's headstone to my dad, and it didn't take long for pictures to be splashed across the papers. The photo that Mr. McBride took of it was reprinted nationally, and the interstate manhunt refocused on Black Deer Falls. For a few days, the town was once more swarmed by state patrol and federal agents knocking on doors and searching attics and storage sheds. They inspected every inch of our cemeteries, looking for more marks. When I went by the woman's cell, Marie was up on her toes, staring down through her windows. She was watching the extra patrol cars come and go from the parking lot. "Dummies," she said, "driving all the way out here, guns blazing, like they don't know that headstone could have been carved up as soon as it went in." That's just what I thought, but I just said, "You must be pleased. He's keeping them jumping." The headlines were all about the killer again, and for a little while she would have forgotten. He'd bought her more time. "Why would he want to?" I asked. "I thought you said he wanted you caught, then that he wanted it over." "I said I didn't think he figured it would take this long, but as for what he wants, I don't always know." She turned and saw my face covered in bruises with my lips scabbed in the middle. "What happened?" "Just some guys from school." She came to the bars and wrapped her fingers around them. "Tell me." So I did. I played it off as a joke, as a scuffle. "They were just fooling around," I said. "They pointed a gun at your face," said Marie. "It wasn't like that. I'm okay. Percy's okay." "They're bullies," she spat. She let go of the bars and dug her fingernails into her palm. Then she let go and did it again. Rudy Bartholomew," she said. "Morgan Todd." She repeated the names I told her and dug her nails into her fist. "Marie," I said. "I don't want to talk today, Michael." "Marie." The tips of her fingernails had broken the skin. They came away red. "Marie, stop that." I opened the door to the rest of the jail and called for Nancy. "Everything's fine," Marie said. I left when Nancy got there. Later she told me that Marie willingly stuck her arm through the bars and let her clean and bandage the wounds, and Nancy trimmed Marie's nails down on both hands to the quick. "She did that?" Percy asked when I told him. Christ! We were sitting in the school parking lot the Monday after the cemetery. As had become usual, we were in no hurry to go in. My face was still bruised, and you could still see the cut on my lower lip. We'd seen Morgan go in earlier, and he'd seen us. He sort of looked scared, and maybe a little sorry. Percy said he didn't look sorry enough. "Is she?" Percy asked and twirled his finger beside his ear to ask if she was crazy. "No," I said. "She was just upset." But her reaction had disturbed me, too. I'd never seen anyone behave that way. "Well, she's not the only one," he said. They'll get their payback." "No, let it go, Perce." "You can't be serious." "I am." But inside, I was boiling. If I could have whisked my classmates away with a thought, they would have disappeared. Morgan, Rudy Bartholomew, even Carol. Those guys had done what they did because they were angry. Because they were scared of the killer and of Marie. but they'd been able to do it to me because to them I was Marie. I was an outsider. I'd never quite fit in. I never found my place except with Percy. I'm not staying here, Percy, I said. After this is over, after graduation, I'm getting out. I know, he said. I always knew that. He stared out the window, watching the last of the students hurry inside, wrapped up in their coats, their books clutched their chests as they ducked against the cold morning wind. It used to make me mad, you know. He always had one foot out the door, on to bigger and better things. Better than this. Better than me. Not better than you. Well, this town is me, he said and pointed to himself. So how was I supposed to feel? But now I think I really would go with you. Now it feels like Black Deer Falls isn't such a good place. He must like it, Percy said, and I knew he wasn't talking about Morgan or Rudy. He must like what he's done to us. Sometimes it was hard getting Marie to talk about the murders. She would wander off or daydream. She would ask about Percy or Nancy or Dawn. Other times it was easy. I'd ask and she'd answer. My mother and stepfather, Peter Knupp, the student nurses, the Taylors, the truck driver and his hitchhiker, the guys at the gas station, Cheryl, the waitress at the truck stop, the students, Stacy Lee and Richard, and the Carlsons. So that's everyone, I said, and no undiscovered victims in between? No, she said and looked at my empty pockets. I had yet again forgotten to bring her any cigarettes. So the Taylors were killed right after the nurses, I asked for clarification. Because they lived alone and kept to themselves, the Taylors' bodies hadn't been found until after the discovery of the next victims, the truck driver Monty Letourneau and his unidentified drifter. Yes, it was August 8th. You're sure? I'm sure. He was careful about dates. I thought it was dumb. When you had forever, what did the date matter? Marie rolled her eyes. But he said that was precisely why it did. And it was after the killings at the Taylor house that you came upon Monty Letourneau and his hitchhiker? Monty first, and he picked up the hitchhiker later. Who, Monty or the blood drinker? She said, and her eyes widened when I grimaced. What? You gave him that name. All right, I said, what happened with the hitchhiker? How did his and Monty Letourneau's bodies wind up so far away from each other? Because they ran. Like Stephen Hill ran? Why them and not the others? Maybe he led them, Marie said. I don't know. She fidgeted sometimes, running her fingers through the ends of her long brown hair. He likes Stephen Hill. Stephen Hill was good looking. Better looking than he was even. Is that why he was stripped? Marie shook her head again. It was just a game. What kind of game? Like a cat with a bird, she said and looked up. She seemed a little angry, frustrated with me. So he liked it, the running? And the screaming. They were all quiet at first. Peter Knupp, the Taylors. Those nurses were like two spoony church mice. But by the time he got to Cheryl Warren's, the waitress at the truck stop where Monty Letourneau's truck was found abandoned. Cheryl screamed so loud, my ears hurt. For a moment, Marie's eyes clouded, and we sat in silence. On the tape, it goes on for 50 seconds. It didn't seem so bad, you know, not at first. Some of them even smiled. Peter Knupp was smiling until he was dead. Smiling, I noted and jotted it down. Listen, Marie said. I'm going to tell you this, but I don't want you making fun. I need you to believe that everything I say is true, even if you only keep on believing it until I'm done. Got it? I got it. I won't make fun. When Marie had seen the picture of Steve's headstone, she wasn't surprised, but no one else knew what to make of it. In the end, they called it unexplained, an unexplained prank. But I'd had enough of the unexplained. I was ready to believe. I told you he had tricks, she said, to make people see what he wanted them to see. He used them all the time. If there was something he wanted, he said all kinds of things to get people to invite him. He told Walter and Evangeline Taylor that we were their grandchildren. Evangeline kept saying how sorry she was, that she didn't have any sweets for us or any presents. And she said our house was a mess, but it wasn't. Are you close to your grandparents, Michael? I was. Marie nodded. I never knew mine, not even my mother's. She had an older sister, but I never met her either. So you tricked them, I said, putting her back on topic. But how did you kill them? I didn't kill them. I never killed anyone. Then how did he? She took a deep breath. We stayed with them all night playing the game. Then we put them into bed. Into their night clothes. I shaved Walter's face with the razor. The same razor? She nodded. He drank Walter first. He slit his wrist. Evangeline didn't even notice. She just kept looking at Walter like he was talking to her. And you never considered letting them go? He wouldn't have let them. But what about you? Why didn't you run? Did he carry a weapon? Did he have the razor in his hand the whole time? No. Then why didn't you go for help? But Marie didn't answer. You can check everything I told you about what they found. It'll match. Marie, I said, why did you go with him? Was it really just because he was good-looking? Was he so good-looking that it made it okay? No. She looked at me sharply. You wouldn't understand. Everyone said I was a bad girl. He said that I wasn't.